All right, hello everybody. So let's start off with imagining. You want to build your dream home, or your dream office, or your dream shop. It's very similar to building an e-commerce store. You need a bunch of elements to go together. We can compare this very well. You need a vision, you need a solid foundation to get the store up. And you need the essentials, the foundations, the walls, windows and utilities. But most important, you need the end goal. So what kind of structure are we building? The most important thing in building a house, in building an e-commerce store, is defining goals. We need to understand what we want to build. If it's a high throughput store, we need to understand how big is it going to be. We also need to outline what success looks like and move that to a blueprint. And we need to design the structure that accounts for all of the needs. So what are we building? We need data. We need data to understand the size of the build we have to do. If you're planning to sell 50 to 100 products, they're not being like bought often, you most likely don't need a skyscraper, right? But if you're selling all of the time, you're always out of stock, the visitors are out of the roof, of course you need to consider that. And you'll most likely see it in your existing data. You need to consider data management possibilities like PIMs and ERPs to actually handle this. And you need to outline the necessary requirements so you can give that along to your team, and for that to be noted, and for that to be as the success story. So where are we building it? That's the most important question. Where are we hosting it? Is it on cloud? Is it on premise? Is it on a bare bones server in our closet? That's a decision we can take, and we need to understand how much will that cost. Because you can build a giant store. It's going to handle like 10,000 or 1 million users, but it's going to cost you. Do you need that? The good thing about there's a possibility to move locations afterwards. With a house, it's a lot more difficult. It's possible at some scenarios, but not really. With Magento, you can move it to a different place and still be fine with it. Who is building it? You need a tailored partner or a team to actually build it. The people with the experience of these high throughput stores are going to help you along and explain to you what steps do you need to take to actually get your store from being a mediocre store to being the one that can support all the traffic that's about to come in. The development team and the infrastructure team are the most important part here. They need to work in unison. They need to understand each other and go ahead and talk to each other like they were best friends. Because when the disconnect happens, then the disconnect happens in the store as well. And experience matters. Experience matters very much here. So who am I? I'm Emils. I'm from Latvia. I'm in the e-commerce industry for about 10 years and more than 6 at Magebit. Currently, I'm a tribe lead developer and a solutions architect, so I plan out these high throughput stores and help people grow with them. So I've been involved in launching more than 50 stores from industry leaders like Snap-on to large local giants like Capital in Latvia. I've worked with multiple projects that are above 1 million SKUs, high throughput, basically what I'm talking about today. So let's talk about each of the building blocks. So first, we have the foundation. The foundation in the e-commerce store is the infrastructure and the hosting. It must be solid. If the foundation starts to sink, the structure above it is going to twist, it's going to break, it's not going to work. We need to properly size and accommodate what we put on top of the foundation. We cannot build it too small, we cannot build it too large, it has to be just right. And we need to avoid wasting money, avoid wasting resources with the infrastructure, but we need to account for what we need. So the structure, We love Magento. The Magento is the structure. It provides all the functionality that we need to run our store. Not only the ones that Magento offers, but also the ones we put on top of it. We need the structure to be sound. If you have the foundation, a solid foundation, but you forgot to brace the walls, well, that's not going to help. And a good thing here is that it's the same as it was with the foundation. The structure can be changed. It's not permanent. Once you do something, you can still go back, and you can go back to the core and change something. Then we have doors, windows, utilities. So the doors are gateways for the customers to come in. It's like CMS pages, categories, products, homepage. That's all the doors that the customer interacts with. And the main door is the one that customer sees first. When they search, I want to buy X on Google, and they get your site, that's a part of the main door. The windows we consider external services that we use. It might be payment providers, shipment providers, any APIs that we use, that our structure needs to interact with to run. And the utilities, like content delivery networks, monitoring tools like New Relic, and caching, Varnish, Redis, so that we don't want to let the heat in. So the utilities help us run the AC much more efficiently. So we use the white paper from Adobe to understand what Adobe Commerce is capable of. And the white paper indicates load times, indexing times, API response times, and a bunch of other data that actually show that Magento can scale. And we're going to talk about only two of the results. The first one is catalog browsing. These graphs are indicated when there are 1,250 people on the store, so visitors are actively clicking. And then these measurements take place. And we can see even with that amount of people, the average response time is less than 1 second. And the P95, which is 95 of the worst requests, is still below 1.5 seconds. And there are two graphs here. The first one is guest users. The second one is logged in customers. And also here we have the purchase flow. Most important part of the e-commerce store. So same 1,250 users, measuring logged in and guest purchase flows, and we can still see the results are extremely impressive. So the results. So Adobe Commerce can support high load. It can support the 550,000 page views a second with a response time less than 1 second. If you improve that result to 2, it goes a lot higher. Also, these results were not with caching layers in mind. These results were pure. So adding Varnish on top, adding Redis on top will increase these 2 to 3 times, up to 1.5 million views an hour. And Adobe Commerce can serve 10,500 orders an hour with response time less than 1 second. We tried to reproduce these results. So this was on 242 on Adobe Commerce. We set it up on Magento on 247. Kind of the same infrastructure. They don't go into 100% detail how they do it. We tried to reproduce it as close as possible. We could see very similar results while running our stress test. So how do we build it? We have the blueprint. We have the main building blocks. What's next? How do we get these things to a customer-facing product? Here we have an example. This is going to be an example that we would use to build this high-throughput store. So the foundation would be properly sized and configured. We would use a separate front-end, back-end instance configuration with vertical and horizontal auto-scaling. So vertical scaling would be that we would run that before campaigns. We would increase the size of our existing containers, just so when that load hits, we have a little bit more time to scale horizontally. And horizontal scaling is when we have a house, and we put one right next to that one. So the customers can choose which one to go to. And here I have a good example of a ticket booth. Like lines in the Disneyland. It might be one ticket booth open, and you see a long line. But if you open up 5 and there's a person like, go there, go there, go there, go there, it goes a lot quicker. That's the same thing we have here in Magento when using horizontal scaling. And external services that Magento uses, MySQL, Redis, Elasticsearch, we set those up as external AWS services, so it doesn't impact the main load on the containers that we have. And with it being external services, we can very easily scale them in AWS to get the best results. So the structure, of course, when making a store, the end goal is a purchase. But there's a bunch of considerations. Some are for the core, some are for the custom development. So for the core, we would recommend asynchronous ordering, asynchronous email sending, and of course, parallel indexing, which is extremely important with a store that has very, very big product amount. One thing that can work, can not work in some scenarios is disabling inventory cart checks on high load scenarios, where you only get the, sorry, this product is not in stock in checkout. It can work if you're handling a lot of orders, but you can, like, if you turn that on, it's gonna help reduce the load on the server drastically. And for custom development, pulling data from Elasticsearch wherever is possible is the key. I've seen it so many times where you run repositories and everything, and you get the data from the database. But why do you need it? Most of the front-end pages, you can use Elasticsearch and interact with that to actually get the data you need. And if you don't have that data there, is it public enough data to put it there? Most likely, yes. Consider lazy loading data, and this is an important part as well. If you have a pop-up that gets open 5% of the time, why do you need to load it immediately? It's not going to help anybody. If the 5% of the people click on it, yeah, show them a small loader or pull it up or just load it in background once the page loads. Next is optimizing the database for high throughput, because I've seen it a bunch of times where people implement MySQL queries or repositories or additional functionality, but they don't consider that you get a query on one page you get like 10 to 15 queries. You can unify that, you can put that all together, you can add indexes, you can add batching in order to make those queries faster. Offloading heavy process is extremely important from the front end. For example, we don't want to run cron on the front end. We can have multiple backend instances where cron runs. If we run it on the front end, it's going to work. It can impact some performance. We cannot modify the services enough because we need to consider that something can run, and cron doesn't like when it crashes. Heavy data changes, like, for example, price changes at the middle of the night, or adding a lot of SKUs. We want to try to run those when the traffic is the least, so that the customers don't see something being indexed, cache being cleared, or something like that. So we offload the heavy processes, heavy data changes on low traffic, so it doesn't require crash killing. And one important part here is that we need to, I wouldn't say modify, but look at cache and validation strategies. Because if you update a product, it's going to clear the product page, all the category pages that the product is in, and maybe the home page if you have it on the slider. So that needs to be taken into consideration because it's going to take some time for it to load up. And on-off switch for functionalities. If it's not critical, implement that switch. And when you get those high traffic spikes and you don't need that, hey, like a live chat or something, just turn it off for that exact moment. Turn it back on when the traffic cools down. The doors are very closely related to the foundation. And we need to try to cram in as many people in the doors as possible to see if they're going to get in. So we load test, and we consider the scale-up time by using these doors. If we have a high scale-up time, that's going to cause issues where the server is full, but the other one hasn't spawned yet. And we want to make the customers come in, and we want the customers to feel that they can come in quickly. And we want to reduce the amount of doors we have. When the customer has to go through labyrinths to find what they're looking for, it's bad for them because they're frustrated, and it's bad for us because they just did 6, 7, 8 requests that were not necessary. So the less steps, the better. When talking about the windows, we would use external PIM systems because you can manage products in the backend in Magento. Once you start getting up to 750K and above, you need to start doing considerations like disabling keyword search, because if you use that, your site's going to crash. And disabling modifying the grid so it shows less columns, because then it takes 2 to 3 minutes to load. So if we can handle these outside of Magento and use Magento as a core, that helps with these large amounts of products. And there are a lot of PIMs that Magento support and have support for Magento, and I would recommend using those when going above 1 million products. Order output into the ERP is also extremely important because most of the businesses that are going to have this amount of SKUs, it's going to be hard for them to manage them in Magento. They most likely have 6, 7, 8 steps to ship a product. So handling that in an ERP is going to be a lot better, and syncing that data over just for the customers to see where that order is. And we also need asynchronous syncing to the ERP. Because if we do it in real time, that's going to cause issues. For example, your ERP goes down, well, no orders for you. API requests also can be slow, especially on high load, REST, GraphQL. They're good, you can use them, but you need to ensure that the requests are cached and that they are quick and that you don't leave something in there that you don't want. So the utilities, we mostly do Cloudflare. We do Cloudflare Pro plans with image optimizations and caching. This helps to reduce the load on your server because Cloudflare is going to turn the image from the closest one it has, and we don't have to get that request. And it also has a lot of useful tools for protection like firewalls and speed improvements and redirect rules that can help you identify when you want to move something across to a different section of the page. So New Relic is the monitoring tool. This is an extremely powerful tool. In all of the Meet Magento conferences, somebody is talking about New Relic. I don't know if we have that talk today, but most of the time there is. It can output predefined alerts to understand where the bottlenecks come from your application, so you can be on top of the code, on top of the infrastructure, not only putting out fires that have already happened. And it can monitor both front end and the back end. It can monitor all the performance of what you're sending to the ERP and what you're getting back, connections between databases, and it also can monitor, in some parts, page speed and stuff like that. And Varnish and Redis as the caching service. Varnish can be replaced with Fastly. They're interchangeable. But we tend to use Varnish, and we use Redis for another caching layer like sessions. And these don't help not to let the heat in, because these are the ones that are going to get the request first. If the Varnish has it cached, no problem. We have less load on our database, on our Nginx, on any other infrastructure element, just because Varnish is going to return the content back. One important thing here is, when talking about cache, some pages are uncached, like the checkout, like the My Account, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can change checkout. You can change My Account to cache specific elements and for the other ones to load in dynamically. This helps when you're having high throughput stores and My Account is being actively used. We're going to get a lot of requests. But most of the elements in the page doesn't change. Like the sidebars, the header, footer, those all can be cached. And reducing customer groups. Each customer group in Magento causes a new cache entity to be created. This can be very vital for if you have a lot of customer groups. You're going to have, like a customer comes in and it's going to be, yeah, the page is not cached for you. But for guests, it is, yeah. And then there's this feeling like you come in on a really fast site and you log in and it's really slow. And you don't want to use your account anymore. So after all of this, it's done, right? Well, no. We need to test all of these systems together. We need to find the bottlenecks and fix them. We can use Magento performance toolkits or any other load testing tools to actually test this. And we want to try to simulate human behavior. We don't want to punch the server as far as we can, because that's not how it works in real life. We want to replicate what we have. Customers browsing, customers waiting for a bit, they scroll down, they check something, then they click again. And we want to replicate this scenario when doing load tests. And we're looking into the future, so Magento updates, extremely important. If you skip an update, if you skip 5, first off, end of the life is coming. Second off, when you now need to update, you need to check a lot more than you did when it was an incremental update. And same with extensions. I've seen it a lot where extensions don't get updated. But why? Just because you start doing some modifications and you think, something's going to break. But no, you need to be on top of that. When you're on top of maintenance, everything gets easier. Because with all of the versions, like for extensions, the people creating the extensions want to make it faster. So you update and you get it faster. And yeah, we need to monitor infrastructure, we need to monitor updates, and get that all up to the latest versions so it's easier for us. In all of this talk, I was talking about houses. How would you feel if I would experiment on a house? If I would take out a load-bearing wall and see if it falls down or not? That would be like a no-no. But here in Magento, we can experiment. We can take stuff out that might be in the core that we don't think we need and just see locally what happens. If it works, well, good. We improved our footprint. We decreased our memory usage. But if it doesn't, oh well, let's put it back. We don't even need to rebuild it. We need to click a few buttons to get it back. Same with removing a window. In a house, yeah, it's doable. Just box it in. In Magento, it's preferable. The less windows you have, the less outgoing services you have, the better. And yeah, we need to find these unused areas, and we need to experiment with them to get them removed, refactored, disabled, whatever, so we can have the best that we can. And we need to analyze the collected data to improve. And we're talking about this. Magento has a huge community. You're all the Magento community. And there are people here that have done great stuff for Magento. And I've put in here 3 of my favorite things to do. First one is Database Splitter Pro. It's in the Magento Adobe-certified marketplace. What it does, it just spawns in read-only databases we can use just to mitigate the load. And this Magento 2 interceptors, the promise that they say is it can improve performance by 15% when you have a lot of plugins in your site. And actually, Jakub was talking just before me. I mentioned him as well. In New York, he talked about microservices on generating images to reduce the footprint on Magento stores. And I would recommend you go watch that talk as well. And let's summarize. Yes, Magento can handle a large amount of products. Yes, Magento can handle a large amount of orders per second. Do you need expertise to build that? Yes. And it's often the small things that are the ones that cause the largest issues, so you need to look at them. But it's all about the plan. The foundation can be changed, moved, same with the store, and keep everything up to date. Thank you. If you want to talk about high throughput stores, you can meet me at the Magebit booth or connect with me on social media. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I was wondering about New Relic. Do you also see performance decrease when it's turned on?
Yeah, there is a drop, but it's not significant enough for us not to use it. With that, what we see on New Relic, we can mitigate that with finding one bad code.
If you're using Cloudflare as a CDN, why aren't you also using it for the page caching?
It's something we've tried. Like we use their DNS services and everything. We've seen this like a Cloudflare worker that caches the pages, but we typically use Varnish, which is a lot more adaptable for us. And putting those two together, there might be considerations that we need to make when clearing something out, because we now have it on Varnish, we might have it on block HTML cache, and we might have it on Cloudflare. Of course, it's going to help. You're going to get deliveries faster, but it kind of depends on how we want to manage it. I would say, yes, it's a possibility to use like Cloudflare workers to cache the pages. And it's actually, I've tested it. It works extremely well. But there's also limitations with workers. And it all comes down to cost.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the presentation, Emils. I liked it. I have a question about personalizing cache. You mentioned that you can hole punch the checkout page, user page. Are you using edge side includes for that or other methodologies?
Edge side includes won't be the best solution for them because it can serve old content and then get to new one. So what we do there is we typically have Redis cache enabled as well. So we can use block HTML to cache most of the elements in the page. And we've also done it where it caches everything, and then instead of providing that data from the backend, we actually use section data to get that data for the customer and then put it in and modify it that way.
Okay, but ESI is out the window for that.
ESI is out the window for that, yeah.
Any questions?
All right, thank you.